The Vorthar High Command Chamber glowed with the soft amber light of tactical holograms. Fleet Admiral Kor stood at the center of the projection, his 6 manipulator limbs folded across his chest carapace in the traditional posture of triumph. Before him, the battle display showed the remains of Earth's defense fleet scattered across the void above New Horizon. Fragmented cruiser hulls tumbled in lazy arcs. Escape pods drifted in clusters too small to matter. The human orbital platform had been reduced to a debris field that glittered like frozen tears against the darkness. "Admiral, the final enemy vessel has been neutralized," reported Commander Threx from the tactical station. His voice carried the slight vibration of satisfaction that Vorthar reserved for complete operational victories. No survivors detected. Kor's sensory clusters pulsed with approval. "Show me the casualty projections." The hologram shifted. Numbers scrolled upward in the Vorthar numerical format. Human warships destroyed, 237. Human support vessels, 411. Human combatants estimated, over 80,000. Kor felt the familiar rush of strategic achievement. His plan had worked perfectly. He had studied human military doctrine for 3 cycles before committing to the assault. He had analyzed their defensive patterns, their tactical preferences, their logistical weaknesses. Everything had aligned with his projections. "Send the victory broadcast to all Vorthar worlds," Kor commanded. "The human threat to our borders has been eliminated. Their expansion into the outer arm has been permanently halted." The command crew erupted in ceremonial clicks of approval. Kor allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He had done what no Vorthar commander had accomplished in 500 cycles. He had broken a species that dared to challenge the Empire's territorial claims. But something pulled at his attention, a discordant note in the symphony of victory. "Commander Threx," Kor said, "replay the battle records. Focus on the human fleet's deployment patterns." The hologram shifted to a tactical replay. Human ships emerged from the jump point in perfect formation. They engaged Vorthar forces with standard defensive protocols. They traded fire, lost ships, retreated in good order. Everything about their performance matched the expectations. Except one detail. Kor watched the human fleet's final moments again. The flagship had maintained position behind the defensive line for the entire engagement. It had been the last ship to fall. The humans had poured everything into protecting that vessel. "Commander, what was the flagship's designation?" Threx consulted his records. "Eternal Vigilance, Admiral, a cruiser-class vessel with standard command capabilities." "Standard?" "Yes, Admiral. No unusual armament. No experimental systems. The vessel was destroyed with all hands." Kor's sensory clusters contracted in confusion. The humans had sacrificed 80,000 lives to protect a ship that carried nothing special. They had fought with the desperate coordination of a species that understood the stakes. They had committed everything they had. But they hadn't looked afraid. Kor had studied fear in every species he had ever conquered. He had watched Glorn military leaders collapse into primal terror when their defenses shattered. He had observed Vethan commanders retreat into catatonic shock when their fleets were annihilated. He had seen the undeniable signs of species-level psychological collapse. The humans had displayed none of that. They had fought with precision. They had died with purpose. And when the final ship exploded, the human communications channels had been filled with something Kor couldn't identify. Not panic. Not despair. Not even anger. The emotion in those final transmissions had been something else. Something that made Kor's sensory clusters twitch with an instinct he couldn't name. "Commander Threx," Kor said slowly, "how many ships do we estimate remain in the human fleet?" Threx's manipulator limbs paused over his console. "Admiral, the human fleet has been destroyed. There are no remaining ships." "On the battlefield, yes, but what about their home system, their other colonies, their reserve forces. The tactical station was silent for too long. Threx's carapace shifted in the equivalent of a shrug. Our intelligence reports indicated that Earth had committed the majority of its military capacity to the New Horizon defense. The ships we destroyed represented approximately 73% of their total fleet. Approximately. Our intelligence estimates were based on satellite observations and intercepted communications. We had no direct confirmation of human military assets beyond their colony defenses. Kor turned away from the hologram. His mind raced through the implications. The humans had claimed the outer arm for colonization. They had expanded aggressively for 2 decades. They had challenged Vorthar authority with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. And when the Vorthar had finally responded with overwhelming force, the humans had sent a fleet that represented what? Kor's sensory clusters pulsed with rising unease. He had assumed the human fleet was their maximum effort. He had assumed they had brought everything they had to protect their foothold in the outer arm. But the humans hadn't fought like a species fighting for survival. They had fought like guards protecting a door, like soldiers holding a perimeter while civilians retreated, like warriors who knew that losing this battle meant nothing compared to the war that would follow. "Commander Threx," Kor said, his voice dropping to the whisper that preceded crisis, "I want every piece of intelligence we possess on human military capacity. I want fleet projections, shipyard estimates, population mobilization ratios. I want everything." Threx's manipulator limbs trembled. "Admiral, is there a problem with the victory?" Kor stared at the holographic remains of the human fleet. Something about the pattern of debris caught his attention. The way the wreckage drifted. The way the escape pods clustered. The humans hadn't tried to evacuate their capital ships until the very end. They had died in formation. They had taken their losses without breaking. That wasn't the behavior of a defeated species. That was the behavior of a species that knew something their enemies didn't. "Commander," Kor said, "begin preparations for a reconnaissance mission to the Sol system. I want to see Earth for myself." The command chamber fell silent. Every Vorthar in the room understood what that request implied. Earth was the human homeworld. Earth was the heart of their civilization. Earth was the one place the Vorthar had never penetrated. And now, in the moment of their greatest victory, Admiral Kor wanted to look into the human heart. He had a terrible feeling about what he would find there. The numbers don't match. Commander Threx had not slept in 32 standard hours. His quarters aboard the Vorthar flagship were immaculate by military standards. The walls hummed with the white noise of environmental systems. The viewport showed the peaceful starfield of Vorthar-controlled space. But Threx couldn't rest. His sensory clusters kept returning to the data displays on his console. The numbers refused to make sense. The human fleet they had destroyed at New Horizon represented 237 warships. By Vorthar tactical standards, that was a significant force. That was the kind of fleet required to defend a major colony. That was the kind of fleet that could challenge a Vorthar expeditionary group. But Threx had been studying the human ship production estimates. He had been comparing known human shipyards to Vorthar equivalents. He had been running projection algorithms that his tactical instructors would have considered impossible. The Vorthar Empire produced warships at a rate of approximately 450 vessels per standard cycle. This production capacity was considered sufficient to maintain Vorthar dominance across 3 galactic arms. This production capacity had enabled the Empire to conquer 67 species over the course of 10,000 cycles. Human production estimates, derived from satellite observations and intercepted industrial communications, suggested something different. Threx's manipulator limbs trembled as he accessed the latest projections. Human shipyards in the Sol system alone appeared capable of producing over 2,000 warships per cycle. Human colonies in the Outer Arm had shipbuilding facilities that rivaled Vorthar military yards. But that wasn't what bothered Threx. What bothered Threx was the way the humans had reacted to their defeat. The Vorthar intelligence network had been monitoring human communications for cycles. They had expected panic after the New Horizon disaster. They had expected emergency broadcasts. They had expected calls for surrender or pleas for negotiation. Instead, the humans had gone quiet. Not silent, not in the way of a civilization hiding from a predator. The humans had simply stopped broadcasting military communications. They had stopped transmitting emergency signals. They had stopped doing the things that defeated civilizations did. Threx pulled up the civilian network records. Human media outlets were reporting the New Horizon battle as a setback. Human political leaders were describing the loss as unfortunate but expected. Human financial markets had experienced a brief dip and then stabilized. The humans had been attacked. The humans had lost 237 warships. The humans had seen 80,000 of their people die in a single engagement. And they had responded by going back to work. Threx's sensory clusters pulsed with something he couldn't name. He had been a Vorthar intelligence officer for 23 cycles. He had studied the psychology of defeated species. He had written papers on post-conquest behavioral patterns. Nothing in his training explained what the humans were doing. He accessed the emergency preparedness records. Every species the Vorthar had ever conquered had shown the same pattern when threatened with extinction. They had mobilized their entire population. They had converted civilian industry to military production. They had drafted every able-bodied adult. The humans had done none of these things. Their civilian population was still going to work. Their schools were still operating. Their entertainment industries were still producing content. Their economies were functioning at normal levels. As if the loss of 80,000 soldiers was just another day. Threx's manipulator limbs reached for his communication console. He had to speak with Admiral Kor. He had to share what he had discovered. He had to make the Admiral understand that something was fundamentally wrong with their understanding of humanity. The connection opened. Kor's face appeared on the display, his sensory clusters arranged in the pattern of interrupted concentration. "Commander, I was about to contact you. My own analysts have found something troubling." Threx's carapace tightened. "Admiral, the human production estimates don't match their military behavior. They should be in a state of total mobilization. They should be converting everything they have to war production. But they're not. They're acting like nothing happened." Kor's sensory clusters contracted. "That's what my analysts found as well. But there's more. We've been estimating human military capacity based on their colony defense forces. We've been assuming that the fleet we destroyed represented the bulk of their military. But Commander, the humans didn't even bother to evacuate their civilian population from New Horizon." Threx froze. "What?" New Horizon had a civilian population of over 3 million. The humans didn't evacuate them. They didn't try to move them to safety. They just left them in place while their military forces fought a defensive engagement. Threx's mind raced through the implications. The humans had sacrificed 80,000 soldiers to defend a colony they weren't trying to protect. They had fought a war to preserve territory they hadn't bothered to evacuate. Why would they do that? Kor's voice carried an edge that Threx had never heard before. Because they didn't think they would lose. Commander, the humans went into that battle expecting to win. They sent a force they thought was sufficient to defeat us. And when they lost, they didn't panic. They just started preparing for the next engagement. Threx's manipulator limbs gripped his console. "Admiral, that doesn't make sense. The humans knew our military capacity. They knew we had superior numbers. They had to know they would lose that engagement. Did they? The question hung in the air between them. Threx replayed the battle records in his mind. The human fleet had engaged Vorthar forces with confidence. They had fought with discipline. They had died with purpose. They had never once tried to retreat. The humans fought like they had reinforcements coming, Threx said slowly. They fought like they were holding the line until something arrived. Kor's sensory clusters pulsed with agreement. But nothing arrived. The battle ended. The reinforcements never came. Threx accessed the human fleet movement records. He traced the paths of known human warships. He mapped every confirmed vessel location. And then he found something that made his carapace tight in primal fear. "Admiral," Threx said, his voice dropping to the whisper of disaster, "the human fleet that engaged us at New Horizon. It wasn't a fleet. It was a patrol group." "A what?" "I've been analyzing their fleet formations. The vessels we destroyed were all relatively small. They had limited armament. They lacked the command and control capabilities of a true battle fleet. They were the equivalent of our border patrol units." The silence on the communication channel stretched into eternity. Threx watched Admiral Kor's sensory clusters cycle through patterns of denial, fear, and finally, acceptance. "Commander," Kor said, "you're telling me that we just destroyed a human patrol group, that we engaged the equivalent of a Vorthar sector patrol force and declared it a major victory." Threx nodded, and the humans responded to the loss of that patrol group by doing nothing, because they didn't consider it a major loss. They considered it a minor incident. Kor's voice carried the weight of dawning comprehension. The humans weren't defending their colony. They were testing us. They were seeing what we could do. They were giving us a chance to show our hand. And we showed them everything. Threx accessed one final data set: human military communications patterns, human fleet movement logs, human industrial projections. The numbers made his sensory clusters ache. "Admiral, I've run the projections based on worst-case scenarios. The human fleet we destroyed at New Horizon represents less than 7% of their total military capacity. And that's assuming they haven't been building more ships while we've been celebrating." Kor's carapace went rigid. 7%. The humans have been preparing for this conflict for decades. They've been building ships and training personnel and stockpiling weapons. And they've been doing it all under our noses. We thought they were expanding into the outer arm. We thought they were colonizing new worlds. We thought we understood their ambitions. Threx paused. The next words felt like acid in his throat. "Admiral, the humans never wanted the outer arm. They were using it as a staging ground. They were positioning themselves for something else, something bigger. And we just gave them the excuse they needed to use everything they've built." Kor's voice came through the channel as a whisper. "Commander, what are they preparing for?" Threx looked at his displays. The projections were impossible. The numbers were insane. But they were the only numbers that made sense with everything they knew about human behavior. "Admiral, I think the humans have been preparing for a war that hasn't started yet. A war against something that terrified them so much that they built the largest military force in galactic history just to survive it. And we just attacked them." "Yes, Admiral, we just attacked the species that built that force, and I don't think they're going to respond the way we expect." Kor's final words before the connection closed haunted Threx for the rest of his shift. "Commander, prepare a report for the High Council. Tell them the truth. Tell them we've made a terrible mistake. Tell them that the humans were never the enemy we should have worried about." The messenger. The vessel emerged from the jump point at the edge of the Vorthar home system, with the unhurried grace of something that feared nothing. Commander Threx watched the sensor readings with growing unease. The ship was small by military standards. Its hull was unremarkable. Its engines emitted the standard signature of human propulsion technology. but it carried no weapons. No weapons at all. "Admiral," Threx reported, "the human vessel is broadcasting a peaceful approach request. They want to send a representative to the homeworld." Admiral Kor stood at the center of the command chamber, his sensory clusters arranged in the pattern of controlled tension. "They're not afraid of what we might do to them." Apparently not. The human vessel continued its approach. It moved through the Vorthar defense perimeter without hesitation. It passed between warships that could have vaporized it with a single volley. And it kept coming. "Admiral, I strongly advise against allowing this vessel to approach the homeworld. It could be carrying weapons we can't detect. It could be a suicide mission." Kor's sensory clusters pulsed with the equivalent of a grim laugh. "Commander, if the humans wanted to destroy us, they wouldn't send a single unarmed vessel. They would send everything they have. This is something else." "Then what?" "I don't know, but we're going to find out." The human vessel docked at the Vorthar military station without incident. The pilot emerged into the reception bay with the calm composure of someone making a routine delivery. She was human, female, middle-aged by their standards. Her hair was streaked with gray at the temples. Her face carried the lines of someone who had seen too much and expected worse. But her eyes were what caught Threx's attention. They were calm, completely calm, the kind of calm that came not from ignorance but from terrible knowledge. "I am Commander Alara Vance of the Terran Defense Force," she announced. "I come bearing a message for your High Council." Kor stepped forward. His 6 manipulator limbs arranged themselves in the formal greeting pattern of a ranking officer. "I am Fleet Admiral Kor. I will convey your message to the Council." Vance's lips curved in something that might have been a smile. "I appreciate the efficiency, but the message is for the Council, not for you." Kor's sensory clusters contracted with anger. "I am the Supreme Commander of Vorthar military forces. Anything you have to say to the Council, you can say to me." "That's not how this works." Kor paused. The human's voice carried an edge of steel that cut through his authority. She wasn't afraid of him. She wasn't intimidated by his rank. She wasn't impressed by the power he represented. She was delivering a message, and she was going to deliver it to exactly the people she had been ordered to reach. "Very well," Kor said, forcing his sensory clusters to relax. "I will arrange a meeting with the High Council, but I warn you, Commander Vance, if you attempt any act of aggression against our leadership, you'll destroy my ship and kill me. I understand. That's why I didn't bring any weapons." Threx stepped forward. "Why are you here, human? Why would you come to our homeworld after we destroyed your fleet?" Vance turned to face him. Her eyes held his sensory clusters with an intensity that made him want to look away. "Because," she said quietly, "the war hasn't started yet. You killed some of our people. You destroyed some of our ships, but you haven't really hurt us. Not yet." The words hung in the air like the promise of something terrible. Threx felt his carapace tighten involuntarily. "What do you mean, the war hasn't started yet?" Vance's expression shifted. The calm parted to reveal something beneath, something cold and ancient and utterly remorseless. "Commander, you attacked a forward observation post. You engaged our border patrol. You killed soldiers who were doing their jobs, and now you're celebrating like you've won something." She stepped closer. Threx forced himself not to retreat. "You won a battle, congratulations. But here's the thing about human military strategy. We don't fight one battle. We fight campaigns. We fight wars. And when we fight wars, we don't stop until we win. Period." Kor stepped between them. "Commander Vance, I don't appreciate threats. You're standing in the heart of Vorthar military power. You're surrounded by soldiers who would happily kill you, and you're talking like you have the advantage." Vance looked at Kor. Her eyes never wavered. "Admiral, I'm not threatening you. I'm explaining your situation. There's a difference." "Explain it to the High Council," Kor snapped. They're waiting. The journey to the Vorthar High Council chamber took 47 minutes. Threx spent the entire trip watching Commander Vance. She showed no nervousness. She showed no anxiety. She showed no sign of the emotions that should accompany someone walking into the lion's den. She just stood there, waiting, patient, calm, like someone who had already seen how this ended. The High Council chamber was the most impressive space Threx had ever entered. The walls were lined with the flags of every species the Vorthar had ever conquered. The ceiling rose into darkness. The floor was polished stone that reflected the amber light of the ceremonial torches. The 12 members of the High Council sat in their elevated positions. Their sensory clusters pulsed with the authority of absolute power. They had conquered empires. They had crushed civilizations. They had never faced a threat they couldn't overwhelm. Commander Vance walked to the center of the chamber and stood alone under the gaze of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. "Commander Vance," the High Council speaker intoned, "you come to us after your species has suffered a devastating defeat. You come to us with nothing but your words. Why should we listen?" Vance reached into her uniform. The Vorthar guards tensed, but she only pulled out a small data device. "Because," she said, "I'm the one who decides whether you live or die." The chamber erupted in angry clicks and hisses. The High Council members leaned forward with fury. "You dare threaten the High Council?" the speaker demanded. Vance activated the data device. A hologram filled the center of the chamber. The image showed Earth's orbital defenses, shipyards, manufacturing facilities. But it was the image behind Earth that made the chamber go silent. The human fleet, all of it, thousands upon thousands of ships spread across a volume of space that dwarfed anything the Vorthar had ever produced. "This," Vance said calmly, "is what you attacked when you destroyed our patrol group at New Horizon. This is what we're going to use to respond to your aggression." The hologram shifted. It showed shipyard production rates, vessel construction timelines, troop mobilization schedules. "The numbers are impossible," the High Council speaker said. "No species could build that many ships. No species could field that many soldiers." Vance's expression didn't change. "We can and we have. The outer arm was never our focus. We wanted you to think it was. We wanted you to think that attacking New Horizon would achieve something, and you fell for it. Completely." The chamber erupted in chaos. Council members shouted over each other. Guards rushed toward Vance, but Kor stepped forward and raised his manipulator limbs for silence. "Commander Vance," Kor said, "you said the war hasn't started yet. What war? What are you preparing for?" Vance looked at him. For the first time, something shifted in her eyes, something like acknowledgement, like respect. "Admiral," she said, "I'm going to show you something. And when I'm done, you're going to understand exactly why the outer arm wasn't important, why we let you take it, why we let you think you won." She accessed another file on her data device. The hologram shifted to show a star chart of the entire galaxy. And on that star chart, something vast and terrible was marked, something that made the Vorthar High Council go silent with primal terror. "Admiral," Vance said quietly, "this is what we've been preparing for. This is why we built everything we built. This is the enemy that's coming for all of us. And you attacked us. You, a species that couldn't beat us, a species that thought we were the threat." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Admiral, you have no idea what you've done." The unveiling. The reconnaissance mission to the Sol system was the most dangerous operation in Vorthar military history. Commander Threx had been given command of the mission personally by Admiral Kor. The High Council had demanded the intelligence. The Council needed to know the truth about human military capacity. They needed to know if Commander Vance's words were empty threats or genuine warnings. Threx had selected the best stealth vessel in the Vorthar fleet. The Shadow Lance was designed to penetrate enemy defenses and gather intelligence without detection. It had served the Empire for centuries. It had never failed. Threx hoped that record would hold. The journey to the Sol system took 17 standard days. Threx spent every moment studying human military patterns. He watched their communications. He tracked their fleet movements. He built a picture of a species that terrified him more with every passing hour. The humans knew about the war. They knew they had been attacked. They knew that a powerful enemy had declared them a target. But they weren't scared. They weren't panicked. They weren't even particularly angry. They were just preparing. Threx watched human media outlets discuss the New Horizon battle like it was a traffic accident. He watched human political leaders describe the loss as a minor setback. He watched human civilians go to work and live their lives and act like the galaxy wasn't falling apart around them. And then the Shadow Lance entered the Sol system. The first thing Threx saw was the orbital defense network. It stretched across the entire inner system like a web of iron and fire. Hundreds of platforms, thousands of weapons emplacements, tens of thousands of automated defensive systems. The Vorthar had estimated Earth's orbital defenses based on satellite observations and intercepted communications. They had projected approximately 200 defensive platforms. The reality was different. The reality was that Earth had over 800 platforms, each one armed with weapon systems that could engage Vorthar warships at ranges the Empire couldn't match. But that wasn't what made Threx's sensory clusters contract in primal fear. What made him afraid was what he saw beyond the defensive network. Automated manufacturing complexes, dozens of them, each one the size of a small moon, each one producing warships at rates that defied Vorthar mathematical models. Threx watched the production logs. The humans were building warships in cycles, complete vessels, fully armed, fully crewed, rolled out of the shipyards and deployed to defensive positions in the time it took the Vorthar to perform a single maintenance check. And then Threx told the pilot to take the Shadow Lance beyond the asteroid belt. He had to know what was there. The first images came through the sensor array like lightning strikes. Threx's manipulator limbs trembled as he processed the data. A fleet, not a fleet, a massive armada, thousands upon thousands of vessels arranged in formations that filled the space between planets, dreadnoughts the size of Vorthar battle stations, carriers that could deploy fighter wings in numbers that would drown Vorthar defenses, warships with weapons that Threx had never seen, weapons that existed only in the nightmares of tactical theorists. And behind them more ships, more than any sensor could count, more than any algorithm could process. The humans had been building this for decades. They had been hiding it in the darkness behind their asteroid belt. They had been preparing for something terrible, something that required a fleet so vast that it bent local spacetime with its gravitational mass. "Commander," the pilot whispered, "what are we looking at?" Threx couldn't answer. His sensory clusters had locked onto the numbers that made everything he had ever believed about military power seem like the fantasies of children. The human fleet represented a threat that the Vorthar Empire couldn't possibly defeat. It wasn't a question of courage or tactics or strategy. It was a question of mathematics. The Vorthar had 45,000 warships. The humans had over 700,000. And they were still building more. "This is impossible," the pilot said. "No species could sustain this level of military production. The resource requirements alone would collapse their civilization." Threx accessed the human resource records. He traced their mining operations, their industrial complexes, their logistics networks. He found something that made his carapace crack with the pressure of his trembling limbs. The humans weren't just building warships. They were building automated mining systems that extracted resources from asteroid fields at rates the Vorthar couldn't match. They were building refinery complexes that processed raw materials with efficiency the Vorthar had never achieved. They were building logistics networks that could support a fleet that would dwarf anything in galactic history. The humans had created the industrial foundation for a war that hadn't started yet. A war that would require resources beyond the scope of anything the Vorthar Empire had ever dreamed of. And the humans were using those resources to build ships that would never fight the Vorthar. Because the Vorthar weren't the enemy. They never had been. Pilot Threx said, his voice trembling, "I need you to run a long-range sensor sweep. Beyond the outer system, beyond the jump points, I need to know what's out there." The pilot complied. The sensor array shifted. It penetrated the boundaries of the Sol system. It reached into the void beyond. And it found something that made the pilot scream. "Commander, Commander, there's something out there. Something huge. Something that's been watching." Threx pushed the pilot aside. He accessed the sensor data himself. The readings made his carapace contract in primal terror. Something was approaching. Something vast. Something ancient. Something that moved through the void with the inexorable purpose of a predator that had been hunting for eternity. And the humans had been preparing for it. "We need to leave," Threx said. "We need to leave now. We need to tell the High Council what we found. We need to make them understand." The Shadow Lance fled the Sol system with all the speed its engines could muster. Threx spent the journey composing his report. He wrote about the human fleet. He wrote about the manufacturing capacity. He wrote about the defensive network. But he saved the worst for last. He wrote about what he had seen beyond the outer system, the approaching threat, the thing that the humans had been preparing to fight, the thing that made everything else seem irrelevant. And in his report, Threx wrote a single sentence that would change the course of Vorthar history. "The humans are not our enemies. They were never our enemies. They are the only species in the galaxy with the capacity to survive what's coming, and we just attacked them. We just gave them a reason to hate us. We just ensured that when the darkness reaches our worlds, the humans will not lift a finger to save us." He sent the report. He waited for the response. And then he watched the Vorthar Empire make the worst mistake in its history. The history they never shared. The Vorthar High Council reconvened in emergency session. The chamber's normal amber glow had been replaced by the harsh white light of crisis illumination. Every member of the council had accessed Commander Threx's reconnaissance report. Every member understood the implications. Except they didn't, not really, not yet. Admiral Kor stood before the council with his sensory clusters arranged in the pattern of controlled desperation. "Honored council members, I have reviewed Commander Threx's findings. The human military capacity exceeds our projections by a factor of 300. We cannot defeat them in open combat. We cannot even hope to survive a direct engagement." The High Council speaker leaned forward, his sensory clusters pulsing with fury. "You're telling us that we should surrender to a species that we just attacked without provocation, that we should bow to creatures we could have wiped out if we had acted with more aggression." Kor's carapace tightened. "Speaker, the humans have been building their fleet for over 2 centuries. They have been preparing for a war that dwarfs anything we could imagine, and we have the temerity to believe that we are their enemy. We are an inconvenience to them, a nuisance. Something to be dealt with after they've handled the real threat." "The real threat," the speaker repeated. "You mean that thing beyond the outer system, that thing Commander Threx detected?" Commander Threx detected something approaching, something that the humans have been preparing for, something that made them build the largest fleet in galactic history. The chamber fell silent. Kor watched the High Council members process the information. He watched their sensory clusters shift through patterns of denial, fear, and finally, the glimmer of understanding. But they didn't understand. Not the way Kor had started to understand. Not the way Threx had described in his report. Honored council members, Core said, I need your permission to access the human historical records, everything we have, every intercepted transmission, every captured database. I need to understand why the humans built their fleet. I need to know what they're afraid of. The speaker's sensory clusters pulsed with suspicion. Admiral, you're requesting access to our most sensitive intelligence assets. You're asking us to trust you with information that could compromise our entire intelligence network. I'm asking you to trust me to find a way to survive. Because if we don't understand the humans, if we don't understand what they're facing, we're going to make a mistake that kills us all. The council debated for 3 hours, but eventually they granted Core's request. What he found in the human historical records changed everything. The first thing Core discovered was the wars. The humans had been fighting each other for their entire history. They had developed weapons of unimaginable destruction and used them on their own species. They had nearly destroyed themselves multiple times. They had survived extinction-level events and emerged stronger than before. But that wasn't what made Core's sensory clusters ache with fear. What made him afraid was the way the humans had responded to their own near destruction. They had unified. They had put aside their differences. They had built a civilization based on mutual survival and collective effort, and then they had looked to the stars. The humans had expanded into space because they had nowhere else to go. They had colonized worlds because their own planet was running out of resources. They had built their fleet because they knew that the universe was full of threats. But they didn't know, not really. They had no idea what was waiting for them beyond the outer arm. And then they found it. The first encounter. The first contact with something that wasn't human. Something that had been watching them for millennia. Something that had seen their wars and their destruction and their survival and had decided they were worth studying. But studying wasn't the right word. The humans had been examined, their weaknesses cataloged, their strengths analyzed. They had been weighed and measured and found inadequate. And then the Vorthar had attacked. The humans had been preparing for a war against something vast and ancient and terrifying. They had been building their fleet to fight an enemy that dwarfed anything the Vorthar Empire had ever faced. And then the Vorthar had attacked them from behind, while they were looking the other way. Core accessed the human strategic documents. He read their projections, their plans, their contingency scenarios. And he found something that made his carapace crack with the pressure of his trembling limbs. The humans had predicted this. They had known that other species would attack them. They had known that the galaxy was full of threats. They had planned for everything. Except for what was coming. Core accessed the final file, the one that explained everything, the one that made the Vorthar Empire's entire military doctrine seem like the fighting of children. The humans had built their fleet for one purpose, one reason, one enemy. And that enemy was approaching. What is it? The speaker demanded. What did you find? Core looked up from his display. His sensory clusters had gone still, completely still. Speaker, the humans discovered something during their early exploration missions. Something that was waiting for them. Something that had been waiting since before their species evolved. Something that has been watching their development with interest. The speaker leaned forward. Interest. Hunger, Core whispered. They call it hunger. The chamber erupted in chaos. Council members shouted over each other. Guards rushed toward Core, but the speaker raised his manipulator limbs for silence. Admiral, I don't understand. What has been watching the humans? What has been waiting? Core accessed the final display. The image showed a star chart of the entire galaxy, and on that star chart, a threat was marked. A threat that had been growing for billions of years. A threat that was now approaching the Vorthar Empire's territory with the inexorable purpose of a predator that had been hunting for eternity. Speaker, Core said, the humans discovered something during their expansion. something that terrified them so much that they built the largest fleet in galactic history to survive it, and they've been preparing for it ever since. The speaker's sensory clusters contracted. What is it, Admiral? What did they find? Kor looked at the image, the threat that had been waiting, the hunger that would never be satisfied. Speaker, the humans found the end of everything. They found a civilization that consumes galaxies, a species that has been eating the universe for billions of years, a threat that makes everything else irrelevant. He paused. The next words felt like acid in his throat. And the humans were preparing to fight it. They were building everything they had. They were sacrificing everything. And we attacked them. We hit them from behind while they were looking the other way. The chamber went silent. The High Council members stared at Kor with the incomprehension of species that had just realized how small they were. Admiral, the speaker said slowly, are you telling us that the humans are the only species in the galaxy with the capacity to fight this thing? Kor nodded. They've been preparing for it for centuries. They've built everything they have to survive it, and we just made ourselves their enemies. The speaker's voice dropped to a whisper. What have we done? Kor accessed the final display. The image showed the approaching threat, the hunger, the end of everything. And it showed the human fleet's response, not to the Vorthar, not to the war they had started, to the thing that was coming. We've done something terrible, Kor said. We've attacked the only species that can save us from extinction, and they're not going to forgive us. The ultimatum. Commander Vance stood before the Vorthar High Council for the second time. Her posture was calm. Her expression was neutral. Her voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. But her eyes told a different story. Her eyes carried the weight of everything she had seen, everything she had lost, everything she was about to do. I'm here to deliver the human ultimatum, she announced. The Terran Defense Force requires your unconditional surrender. The High Council speaker leaned forward. His sensory clusters pulsed with a mixture of fury and fear. Commander Vance, you cannot be serious. We are the Vorthar Empire. We have conquered 67 species. We have never surrendered to anyone. Vance's expression didn't change. You've never faced anyone like us. The chamber erupted in angry clicks and hisses, but Vance raised her hand for silence. The gesture was so commanding that the council actually stopped. You attacked our people. You destroyed our ships. You declared war on a species that was preparing to save the galaxy from extinction. You have no idea what you've done. The speaker's carapace tightened. We didn't know about the threat. We didn't know about the fleet. We were acting on incomplete intelligence. Incomplete intelligence, Vance repeated. You mean you attacked us without knowing what we were capable of? You started a war with a species you hadn't bothered to understand. The speaker's sensory clusters contracted. Commander Vance, we offer a truce. We offer terms. We will withdraw from the outer arm. We will pay reparations for the ships we destroyed. We will. You will what? Vance interrupted. You will apologize. You will pretend that you didn't kill 80,000 of my people. You will act like this never happened. The chamber fell silent. Vance looked around the room. Her eyes met the gaze of each High Council member. Her expression was cold, completely cold. The human fleet is on its way. Right now, as we speak, they've been mobilized, they've been armed, they've been given orders, and they're not coming to negotiate. The speaker's voice trembled. What do you want, Commander Vance? What would it take for the human fleet to stand down? Vance was silent for a long moment. Her eyes carried the weight of everything she had ever lost, everything she had ever sacrificed. I want the Vorthar Empire to understand what you've done, she said. I want you to understand that you attacked a species that was trying to save everyone. I want you to understand that you weakened us when we needed to be strong. I want you to understand that you may have doomed us all. The speaker's sensory clusters pulsed with confusion. Doomed you all? but you have the largest fleet in galactic history. You have resources beyond anything we could imagine. How could we possibly doom you?" Vance stepped closer. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Because we needed every ship we had. We needed every soldier. We needed every resource. And now we have to divert forces to deal with you. Forces that should be fighting the real enemy. Forces that could make the difference between survival and extinction." The speaker's carapace went rigid. "You're telling us that our attack, that it matters, that it actually matters to a force as large as yours?" Vance's expression shifted. For the first time, something like sadness crossed her features. "Speaker, the human fleet is vast, but it's not infinite. We have limited resources. We have limited personnel. We have limited time. And we're fighting a war that you can't even imagine. A war against something that has consumed galaxies. Something that will eat every star in the sky and never be satisfied." She paused. The next words came out as a plea. "We needed to be strong. We needed to be united. We needed to fight the darkness together, and you attacked us. You weakened us. You gave the enemy an advantage that could destroy us all." The speaker's voice carried the weight of dawning horror. "Commander Vance, we didn't know. We had no idea. Now you know, and now you have to make a choice. You can surrender unconditionally. You can accept human oversight. You can help us fight the enemy that's coming, or you can die, your species, your civilization, everything you've ever built. Gone." The chamber fell silent. The High Council members stared at Vance with the incomprehension of species that had just realized how small they were. "We need to discuss this," the speaker said. "We need to." "You have 1 hour," Vance interrupted. "After that, the human fleet arrives, and I can't guarantee what happens next." She turned to leave, but before she reached the door, Admiral Kor stepped forward. "Commander Vance, wait." Vance paused. She looked at Kor with an expression that was impossible to read. "I need to ask you something," Kor said. "Something that's been troubling me since I read your historical records." Vance's expression didn't change. "Ask." "The human fleet, the ships you've been building, the preparations you've been making, they're not for the Vorthar Empire. They were never for us." Vance nodded. "That's correct. They were for the enemy, the thing you discovered, the hunger you described." Vance's eyes carried the weight of terrible knowledge. "That's correct." Kor's sensory clusters pulsed with fear. "Commander, I've seen your fleet. I've seen your preparations. I've seen your defenses. And I've seen the thing that's approaching. The thing that your historical records describe." He paused. The next words felt like acid in his throat. "Commander, the approaching threat is larger than you can handle. Your fleet is vast. Your resources are incredible. But what's coming? What's coming is bigger than anything you've ever faced. You can't win against it." Vance looked at him. Her expression carried the weight of everything she had ever lost, everything she had ever sacrificed, everything she was about to do. "Admiral, you're right. We can't win against it. Not alone. That's why we've been building everything we have. That's why we've been preparing for centuries. That's why we've been making alliances with species who understand the threat." She paused. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Admiral, we need help. We need every species in the galaxy to stand with us. We need to fight together. We need to sacrifice everything." She looked at him with the intensity of someone who had already sacrificed everything. "And instead of helping us, you attacked us. Instead of standing with us, you weakened us. Instead of being part of the solution, you became part of the problem." She turned to leave, but she paused at the door. "Admiral, I'm going to give you one chance to do the right thing, one chance to help us fight the enemy that's coming." She looked at him with the intensity of someone who had already lost everything. "Help us fight the darkness. Help us save the galaxy. Help us survive." She walked out the door. Kor stood in the silence of the High Council chamber. He looked at the speaker. He looked at the council members. He looked at the guards who had been paralyzed by the magnitude of what they had just heard. "The humans," he said slowly, "are giving us a chance to redeem ourselves, a chance to help them fight the enemy that's coming." He paused. The next words came out as a promise. "We need to take that chance, because if we don't stand with them, then when the darkness reaches our worlds, the humans will not lift a finger to save us." The speaker's voice carried the weight of terrible understanding. "Admiral, you're telling us that we need to surrender to the humans, that we need to accept their oversight, that we need to become part of their fleet." Kor nodded. "I'm telling you that we need to do whatever it takes to survive." The chamber fell silent. The High Council members stared at Kor with the incomprehension of species that had just realized how small they were. Then the speaker spoke. "Admiral, contact Commander Vance. Tell her we accept the ultimatum. Tell her we surrender unconditionally. And tell her we'll fight beside them. We'll help them face the darkness. We'll do whatever it takes." The true cost. The human fleet arrived at the Vorthar home system exactly 1 hour after Commander Vance delivered the ultimatum. Admiral Kor watched the sensor displays with the horrified fascination of someone watching their own funeral. Thousands of human warships filled the space around the Vorthar homeworld. Each vessel bristled with weapons that the Vorthar couldn't match. Each vessel carried soldiers who had been training for a war that hadn't started yet. And behind them, the human fleet's true purpose became clear. The ships that the Vorthar had seen on the reconnaissance mission were just the beginning. The humans had brought everything they had, thousands upon thousands of vessels, dreadnoughts that could crack planets, carriers that could deploy fighter wings in numbers that would drown Vorthar defenses, warships with weapons that had never been used against anything living. But that wasn't what made Kor's sensory clusters contract in primal fear. What made him afraid was the way the human fleet was organized. The Vorthar had assumed that the humans would respond with overwhelming force. They had assumed that the humans would destroy them completely. They had assumed that the humans would show no mercy. But the humans weren't attacking. They were surrounding the Vorthar homeworld. They were establishing a defensive perimeter. They were protecting the Vorthar Empire from something else. Something that was approaching. "Admiral Kor," the human transmission came through, "this is Commander Vance. We've received your surrender. We accept it on behalf of the Terran Defense Force." Kor's voice trembled. "Commander Vance, what are you doing? You've surrounded our homeworld. You've brought a fleet that could destroy us 1,000 times over, and you're just standing there." Vance's voice carried the weight of terrible understanding. "Admiral, we're not here to destroy you. We're here to protect you." "Protect us from what?" The transmission paused. Then Vance's voice returned. "Admiral, I'm going to show you something that will make everything clear." The holographic display in the Vorthar High Council chamber shifted. It showed a map of the Vorthar Empire's territory. And on that map, something terrible was marked. Something that had been approaching for centuries. Something that would arrive in the next standard cycle. "Admiral, the enemy that we've been preparing for has been moving through the galaxy for billions of years. It consumes everything in its path. It leaves nothing behind. And it's almost here." Kor's carapace tightened. "Commander Vance, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you warn us?" Vance's voice carried the weight of terrible knowledge. "We tried. We sent messages to every species in the galaxy. We told them what was coming. We told them that they needed to prepare, and they laughed at us. They said we were paranoid. They said we were warmongers. They said we were using the threat as an excuse to build our fleet." She paused, her voice dropped to a whisper. "And then you attacked us. You proved that everything they said was right. You proved that the galaxy couldn't be trusted. You proved that we were alone." Kor's voice trembled. "Commander, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to fix this." "You can't fix it. The damage is done. The enemy knows we're weak. The enemy knows that the galaxy is divided. The enemy knows that we can't fight them together. The transmission paused. Then Vance's voice returned with a new edge. But you can help us. You can fight beside us. You can prove that not all species are as foolish as you've been. Kor's voice carried the weight of dawning understanding. Commander, what do you need? Everything you have, all of your ships, all of your soldiers, all of your resources. We need to fight the enemy together. We need to stand united against the darkness. Kor nodded. I'll make it happen. The next 48 hours were the most intense of Kor's career. He mobilized the entire Vorthar fleet. He recruited every available soldier. He diverted every resource to the human cause. And he watched the human fleet prepare for war. The humans didn't just have ships, they had plans. They had strategies. They had tactics. They had been preparing for this conflict for centuries. They knew exactly what they were facing. They knew exactly how to fight it. But they also knew that they couldn't win alone. Commander Vance, Kor said during one of their many briefing sessions, what's the nature of the enemy? What are we facing? Vance was quiet for a long moment. Then she accessed a data file and displayed it on the holographic display. Admiral, you've seen the images. You've read the reports, but you haven't understood what you're looking at. The hologram showed the approaching threat. It was vast. It was ancient. It was hungry. It's not a species, Vance said. It's not a civilization. It's not anything we can negotiate with. It's a force of nature. It's entropy given form. It's the end of everything. Kor's carapace tightened. Commander, that's impossible. Nothing is that powerful. Nothing can't be fought. Vance's expression shifted. Something like sadness crossed her features. Admiral, when we first discovered the enemy, we thought the same thing. We thought we could fight it. We thought we could win. We thought we could save the galaxy. She paused. Her voice dropped to a whisper. We were wrong. The enemy is beyond anything we can imagine. It's beyond anything we can fight. But we have to try. We have to stand against it. We have to give the galaxy a chance to survive. Kor's voice trembled. Commander, if we can't win, if the enemy is truly that powerful, then why are we fighting? Vance looked at him. Her eyes carried the weight of everything she had ever lost, everything she had ever sacrificed. Because, Admiral, if we don't fight, we die. If we don't stand together, we all perish. There's no alternative. There's no escape. There's no hope. There's only survival. She paused. The next words came out as a plea. We need to fight, Admiral. We need to fight together. We need to prove to the universe that we exist. We need to prove that we matter. Kor nodded. He understood completely. Commander Vance, the Vorthar Empire stands with you. We'll fight beside you. We'll sacrifice everything. We'll prove that we exist. We'll prove that we matter. Vance's expression shifted. Something like hope crossed her features. Thank you, Admiral. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for helping us. She paused. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Thank you for standing with us against the darkness. The New Order. The Vorthar Empire surrendered unconditionally on a day that would be remembered for eternity. But the surrender wasn't what the Vorthar had expected. The humans didn't occupy them. They didn't enslave them. They didn't even demand reparations beyond the withdrawal from human-claimed space. Instead, the humans offered something that terrified the Vorthar even more than their military might. Protection. Commander Vance stood before the Vorthar High Council for the final time. Her posture was calm. Her expression was neutral. Her voice carried the weight of everything she had ever lost. Honored council members, she announced, I'm here to deliver the final terms of the surrender. The High Council speaker leaned forward. His sensory clusters pulsed with a mixture of fear and hope. Commander Vance, we accept your terms. We've already withdrawn from the outer arm. We've already mobilized our fleet to fight beside you. What more do you require? Vance's expression didn't change. Nothing. The speaker's carapace tightened. Nothing. You've already given us everything we need. Your fleet, your soldiers, your resources, your commitment to fight beside us. That's all we ever wanted. The speaker's voice trembled. Commander, I don't understand. You defeated us. You brought a fleet that could have destroyed us 1,000 times over, and you're just leaving. Vance's expression shifted. Something like understanding crossed her features. Speaker, we didn't come here to destroy you. We came here to save you. We came here to protect you from the darkness that's coming. We came here to give you a chance to survive. The speaker's sensory clusters pulsed with confusion. But why? Why would you protect us? We attacked you. We killed your people. We weakened you. Why would you lift a finger to save us? Vance was quiet for a long moment. Her eyes carried the weight of everything she had ever lost, everything she had ever sacrificed. Because, Speaker, we're all that's left. Every species in the galaxy, every civilization, every hope for survival, we're all that stands against the darkness. And if we fight among ourselves, if we let our hatred consume us, then the darkness wins. She paused, her voice dropped to a whisper. The darkness always wins. It's been winning for billions of years. It's consumed galaxies. It's extinguished civilizations. It's eaten stars and planets and everything in between. She looked at the council members. Her eyes carried the weight of terrible knowledge. But we can stop it. We can fight it. We can give the galaxy a chance to survive. And that chance starts with us. It starts with us standing together. It starts with us fighting beside each other. It starts with us proving that we exist. The speaker's voice carried the weight of dawning understanding. Commander, what are you asking us to do? Vance's expression shifted. Something like hope crossed her features. I'm asking you to join us. I'm asking you to fight beside us. I'm asking you to help us save the galaxy. I'm asking you to be part of something bigger than yourselves, bigger than your empire, bigger than your species. She paused, her voice dropped to a whisper. I'm asking you to be part of humanity's fight. I'm asking you to be part of the resistance against the darkness. The chamber fell silent. The High Council members stared at Vance with the incomprehension of species that had just realized how small they were. Then the speaker spoke. Commander Vance, the Vorthar Empire accepts your offer. We'll fight beside you. We'll sacrifice everything. We'll help you save the galaxy. We'll be part of humanity's fight. Vance's expression shifted. Something like relief crossed her features. Thank you, Speaker. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for helping us. Thank you for standing with us against the darkness. The ceremony ended. The Vorthar Empire officially surrendered to the Terran Defense Force. But the surrender wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Admiral Kor stood on the bridge of the human flagship. Commander Vance stood beside him. They watched the Vorthar fleet prepare for war. They watched the humans and the Vorthar work together. They watched the beginning of something new. Commander Vance, Kor said, I've been thinking about everything you've told me, everything you've shown me, everything you've taught me. Vance's expression didn't change. What have you been thinking about? About humanity, Kor said. About everything you've accomplished, everything you've sacrificed, everything you've built. He paused. His voice carried the weight of terrible understanding. Commander, you said that humanity has been preparing for the darkness for centuries. You said that you've built everything you have to fight it. But I don't think that's the whole story. Vance looked at him. Her eyes carried the weight of everything she had ever lost. What do you mean? I mean that humanity isn't just preparing for the darkness. Humanity is preparing for something else. Something that terrifies you even more than the enemy you're fighting. Vance was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke. Admiral, you're right. The enemy we're fighting is terrible. It's vast. It's ancient. It's hungry. But it's not the worst thing we've ever faced. Kor's carapace tightened. Then what is? Vance looked at him. Her eyes carried the weight of terrible knowledge. Admiral, humanity has been fighting for its existence since before we evolved. We've fought wars against each other. We've fought wars against the planet. We've fought wars against the universe itself. And we've survived. We've survived everything that's been thrown at us. She paused, her voice dropped to a whisper. But the worst thing we've ever faced, the thing that terrifies us more than anything else, is the possibility that we might fail, that we might let the darkness win, that we might lose everything we've ever built. She looked at him with the intensity of someone who had already lost everything. Admiral, humanity is fighting for the survival of everything, not just ourselves, not just our species, everything, every civilization, every hope, every dream, everything that's ever existed in the universe. She paused. The next words came out as a plea. We need to win. We need to fight the darkness. We need to give the galaxy a chance to survive. Kor nodded. He understood completely. Commander Vance, the Vorthar Empire will fight beside you, will sacrifice everything, will help you save the galaxy, will help you win. Vance's expression shifted. Something like hope crossed her features. Thank you, Admiral. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for helping us. Thank you for standing with us against the darkness. The human fleet departed the Vorthar home system. They left behind a fleet of Vorthar warships that had been integrated into human defensive networks. They left behind a Vorthar empire that had been transformed from an enemy into an ally. They left behind a new hope for survival. And in the space between the stars, the darkness approached. But the darkness didn't know what it was facing. The darkness didn't know that humanity had been preparing for this moment for centuries. The darkness didn't know that the Vorthar Empire had joined the human cause. The darkness didn't know that the galaxy was united against it. The darkness was about to learn a terrible lesson. Humanity was the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Humanity had survived everything the universe had thrown at it. Humanity had built the largest fleet in galactic history. Humanity had prepared for the end of everything. And humanity was ready to fight. The darkness was coming, but humanity was waiting. Humanity had been waiting for billions of years. Humanity had been preparing for this moment. Humanity had been building everything it had to survive. The darkness was about to meet its match. The end.